what was the value of the loss of love, the loss of this man and what he meant to Shelley and Tangney and the family. And so the jury came back and assessed a total amount of $2.2 million.
Hi again, everybody, and welcome to What's the Verdict, a production of AskTheLawyers.com. I'm Rob Rosenthal, and our goal with What's the Verdict is to bring you some of the best trial attorneys in the country, sharing what it takes to win a case in a courtroom. This time, attorney Grant Lawson of the Metier Law Firm joins us from Casper, Wyoming, where a jury recently awarded his clients $2.2 million for the wrongful death of William Gray. William was riding his motorcycle through a construction zone near Evansville, Wyoming, when he was struck by a car and killed. Let's let Grant pick up this story about determining fault, holding people and companies accountable, and compassionately representing clients through the worst moments of their lives.
They had been working on this project along a stretch of a highway for quite some time, for several months. And unfortunately, there was times when they would switch the intersection setups and the traffic control safety. And so people who were driving through that, especially who had to drive through that commonly, would encounter a different setup and a different traffic control scheme on a daily basis, sometimes more than daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And so on September 12th of 2017, a gentleman by the name of William Gray was out cruising on his motorcycle for his afternoon ride and was heading back towards the town of Casper. And a younger woman named Lana was driving down the road the other way and had her 3 children in the car heading home. And Lana came to the intersection and found that it had changed from the morning before and was set up completely differently, and was set up in a way that caused her to not be clear on where she needed to go or what she needed to do. And that was because the barrels weren't set up properly and caused her to have to take a left turn that would have sent her into oncoming traffic, which then made her or forced her to make a kind of an S-shape or zigzag turn and collided with Mr. Gray, who was on his motorcycle coming the other way. So when we first took a look at the case, it seemed like it was just a really unfortunate vehicle-on-vehicle collision until we actually inspected the video from the law enforcement and photos taken that day of the traffic control, of all these barrels and signs and different pieces of equipment and how it was set up. And it became clear that what Miss Simmons said, the driver of the car, she was correct, that it was confusing. It wasn't set up right. She didn't know where she was supposed to go. And that was what led to this crash occurring. With these highway construction projects, typically, for example, here in the state of Wyoming, the state will contract with a general contractor. They will be awarded the contract for lowest bid to do the entire construction project. And that's usually laid out by the state, which has there's a big plan put together by engineers and staff. And then the general contractor takes that and executes that plan according to not only the rules and standards from the state, but also these federally mandated rules and regulations. And so here in this case, there was a general contractor named Knife River, who's a big company that's all over the West, the Midwest, central part of the U.S. doing highway construction projects. They went out and they hired a local subcontractor here in central Wyoming to provide the traffic control, which means that they would have people on scene at all times setting up the traffic control devices, those cones, those barrels, those signs, according to the plans that were provided and according to the federal regulations, to make sure that they're following those requirements so that drivers have clear guidance.
Along with knowing the facts of a case, Attorney Lawson says that knowing his clients is just as important. During the more than 3 years between the incident and the trial, Grant spent a lot of time with the family.
They're just absolute great people. Shelley is a wonderful woman, and I'm just so thankful to know her and to have represented her. But she's broken. She's broken by the loss of the man who she spent, over 38 years of marriage and over 38 years of her life with. who was her soulmate and the person that she depended upon every day, and was looking forward to spending, the rest of her days with, as she should have been entitled to, if Bill had not been taken away from her. So, Shelley kept Bill's life in focus, his memories in focus, and it's really, really just a special thing to see how she still keeps him alive to his granddaughters, and keeps his memory alive with everything that they do, because he was so important to them and he was so involved in their lives. And the personal representative, as I told you, Tangney, who's Bill's daughter, she's an accomplished, successful veterinarian here in town, and she attributes her success and where she is today completely to her father and how he loved her and how he raised her and how he supported her. And she's just an incredible woman, mother of two beautiful daughters, wife of a great man as well, and just salt of the earth people that I'm thankful that me and my team had an opportunity to fight for.
In a civil case like this one, a trial attorney needs to make a jury understand what led to the injury or death. Were there things the defendants could have done differently that would have prevented injury or death?
The morning of the crash, the state of Wyoming had an engineer or some supervisor that drove the entire length of the construction project, which was many miles. And when he came through that specific intersection, he recognized that it was unsafe. And he conducted a formal review on paper that laid out that it was unsafe and that it needed to be changed. Specifically, there needed to be a properly designated left turn lane heading from the eastbound lane, turning left at this intersection called Coal Creek and Hat 6. And so that instruction was provided to the general contractor that morning around 9 a.m. And unfortunately, the general contractor and its subcontractor did not make those changes. In fact, they didn't do what they were required to do and actually follow the rules and the standards and set up this intersection properly. Well, then, of course, after 5 o'clock in that evening, later in the day, this tragedy occurs because the intersection was never fixed and it was never set up properly, and it forced, unfortunately, these motorists into a dangerous situation that then led to Mr. Gray getting in this crash and dying. Right after the crash occurred, we were contacted and we began investigating, and so that was nearly 3.5 years up until the time we got to trial. And it was very contentious. They fought us the whole way, and they were very unreasonable in assessing their risks of liability. And of course, behind the scenes, this is all of insurance company who's puppeteering everything that's going on, who's paying for the lawyers, who's paying for the experts, who's paying for the defense of the case. They completely blew it. They had every opportunity to come to the table and be reasonable, and they didn't do so. They were entrenched in their idea that they didn't do anything wrong, and they were going to get a Wyoming jury to tell them that they didn't do anything wrong, even though it was clear as day to us. And it turns out the jury, who assessed 90% of the fault for what happened on these two defendants, 60% on the general contractor and 30% on the subcontractor.
Lawson says the fact that in this case someone reported that there was a dangerous situation and nothing was done about it makes the case even more tragic.
There was a cover-up that they tried to say that they did make the changes, and then the finger pointing, well, it was actually YDOT's fault or Lana's fault or anybody else's fault besides ours. That was the most frustrating thing, is that you could just take accountability. You could be responsible for what you did wrong and do the right thing. But they refused to do that. They refused to, and they pushed us into a corner that we had to fight, and we fought and fought until the very bitter end, and we'll continue to do that until there's no more fighting to be done. And that's how we approach every one of these cases.
During his closing arguments, Attorney Lawson shared a story that happened on his birthday and really made this case hit home for him.
I realized that, when I got to unload and I got to cry on my wife's shoulder, so to speak. Shelley didn't. Shelley had to go home to an empty home. Shelley didn't get to have Bill there to talk to and to let out everything that she needed to get out and have someone to cry to. She was going to be alone. And that's when it really dawned on me that's what this is all about. You know, the things that we take for granted, that when we come home from a hard day's work, or even on a good day, that we have our spouse, our partner, to share with, whether it be good or bad, and to help lessen the burden of life, and have that ability to have someone, a companion, to share in whatever you're going through. And that's what Shelley lost. And so when I got out of my truck and I looked up in the sky and I realized this, it gave me the strength that I needed to carry on that next week of trial. I knew that as hard as this had been, as hard as it had been on me and my family and me being gone, this was about Shelley. This was about this family who lost their loved one. And that's why I was doing this. And that's why I was fighting this hard. So the jury came back with a finding of $2.2 million in non-economic damages. That was for the loss of consortium for Shelley, the loss of enjoyment of the relationship and the love that they had, and the loss of love. That's shored up the damages in this case is what was the value of the loss of love, the loss of this man and what he meant to Shelley and Tangney and the family. When we go to a civil trial, we can't hold anybody criminally responsible. The jury doesn't have the power or the ability to hold these defendants criminally liable or punish them with some sort of criminal context or whatever. The only power that they have, the jury has the power to assess an amount of money that's equal to the harm and the damage that was caused, right? And so here, when I asked this jury, when I talked to this jury, I told them that this was going to be a really difficult job of putting an amount of money that's equal to the loss of love. And that's what we had here, is we had a substantial loss of love. And so, yes, the money will never bring him back, but at the same time, we as a community have to appreciate what's more important than love. I don't think there's anything more important than love and the relationships you have and those being taken away. And so if there's nothing more valuable than that, then there has to be an amount of money that equals that harm, that dignifies, an amount of money that dignifies that loss. And it has to be substantial because, just for an amount of money that doesn't really appreciate how much love was lost and what the importance is of that love and that relationship, that wouldn't do good for anyone in this community or in this world, period. And so that's what I talked to the jury about, and they agreed. They agreed that the loss of a man's life, which is the loss of love to this family, was substantial, and it should be substantial. And we should, in fact, appreciate that and dignify that, because that's more important than any piece of equipment or home or piece of art or airplane or anything you can buy for millions of dollars. The most important thing we have are those that we love and the relationships we have. And so, yeah, that was a tough job for them, and I was exceptionally appreciative of the hard work that they did, the jury did, in deliberating on that and really dignifying the loss of this man's life.
That's Wyoming attorney Grant Lawson with the Metier Law Firm with What's the Verdict from AskTheLawyers.com.